Hello, I'm Mr. Donlon, and today we're going to be exploring mythology through the lens of psychology and philosophy. So, a quick disclaimer before we begin. I will be using the phrase myth quite a bit throughout this lesson. The word myth for our lesson today and purpose is just a story, though we will be combining some connections that might have something to do with religion as well. Also, myth and the other one that encompasses a myth is oftentimes a fairy tale. We are not going to look at any of Aesop's fables or any legends or lore or things of that nature. I'm sorry. I know you're excited to talk about the occult, but it's not going to happen. The other thing that's not going to happen is while I will be using the phrase myth quite a bit, I will try not to use the plural of myth, as I really don't like this phrase. I didn't say it, but if you add an S to myths, then you know why I don't like to say it. It just sounds like I'm saying miss. Don't make me do it. I'm going to skip over it. Let's do this, people. All right. We are not busting any myth today. Instead, we are going to look at the philosophy, which is the reason why they exist in the first place. And as it turns out, we got a room full of people that have a lot of very different ideas as to why we tell these crazy, often bizarre stories, and they're going to try to make sense of them. We will put these people into certain categories. First category of people we will talk about to try to explain where mythology comes from is going to be our historical allegory team. The basis of what these people believe is that there is something in history that creates the idea of said myth, whether it be a place, a person. It's got an origin point, and that origin point is real. Let's look at our first guy, Eurysmus. Oh God! All right, that was pretty bad. Okay, we're just gonna call him Greek philosopher number one. This is a couple Greek guys. This is our first Greek philosopher guy. All right, so he's stumbling upon what was then ancient Greece. Let's get a quick little recap here. Okay, he's around the 200s BCE. He comes across what he believes as proof that Zeus, yes, the big guy with the lightning bolt, one day in the past was a real person. And over time, via telephone tag, his story was transformed into not just a story about a regular guy who was kind of awesome, but a regular guy who became a god. This is important because it inspired people for a long time to think of these mythological heroes in terms of people that actually lived, only like Michael Jordan, their legacies got kind of embellished over time. You know, unlike Michael Jordan, maybe like LeBron. Yeah, that fits a lot better. Okay, so he's our first on the list, and he's going to inspire someone named Henrik Schliemann. He's one of our more controversial figures. Let's take a look at what he did. Yeah, it has a lot to do with Troy. I see you down there, Troy. So he sunk his teeth into the idea that Troy was an actual place, kind of like Zeus being an actual person. He went on this big journey looking for the city of Troy, and did he find it? Well, this is where it gets controversial. You see, Heinrich may have found one of the potential locations where Troy could have been, but there were 13 different cities all located in what was modern-day Turkey, and that may have been more of a coincidence. He probably just got lucky because the dude was super rich. He also wasn't really much of a historian. Like, he gave a lot of the ancient relics to his wife to model for them and stuff like that. That was kind of his goal, was to find the riches of the past. And a lot of modern historians aren't really a fan of this guy because you miss a lot of history when you do that. All right, last on our list, and my goodness, does she look like she is about to die of boredom. That's Jane Ellen Harrison. Let's jump right into her. So in 1912, she is starting to see that myths and their religions are kind of similar. So her idea was that we had different rituals, that we need a story to explain those rituals, and eventually people started to believe said story. If this doesn't make much sense, just think back to, like, you know, the chicken or the egg, which came first. She's basically saying what came first, the ritual or the story. She thinks it was the ritual. And then people use mythology to explain why they did a lot of odd social behaviors. I can't get over the fact she's about to fall asleep. I'm sorry. I wish I could wake her up. But I guess I'm that boring, Jane Ellen Harrison. All right. Oh, and it's time to bring up the fake historical allegory team. These are the ancient alien guys. Yeah, they try to say that in the past they were aliens that influenced all these things, and that mythology is a way to describe aliens. No, I'm sorry. It's fine for TV. It's great entertainment. It's often hilarious, but these guys have absolutely no grounding in any history or real research. They're not scholars. Okay, let's go to team number 2. This is our Explain the Universe team, and we only have 2 this time, so let's kind of wrap these guys up real quick. This is the idea that mythology helps to explain the world around us scientifically. But back then they couldn't really do that because they didn't know about the elements, so instead they described water very metaphorically and very symbolically. And you know what? Water would work as like this younger brother, and fire would work as like the older sister, and they often are very opposite, hence fire and water, and they're opposites. And that's how they would tell their stories. So Max Muller and Theanese, I'm going to let them kind of describe some of the basis of their beliefs. But in the interest of time, I'm going to have you pause me very briefly, and I want you to try to see if you can summarize what these 2 individuals are saying. They are saying stuff that are very, very similar. So go ahead, pause me. What the heck are these guys saying? Again, I'm assuming that you paused me. I can't jump through the screen and push the pause button for you, so you know I'm limited. All right, we're moving on. The last team is going to be mythology feels a lot like a dream. These are the 2 that were the spawn of myths being in our mind. The first being Sigmund Freud, who we may know from psychology because he had some pretty wild ideas to say. The second being Carl Jung, a very influential philosopher, himself also a student of Sigmund Freud. So in the 1920s, Sigmund Freud is studying mythology, and he's connecting a lot of it to human desires. Like, for example, a lot of those things like dragons and us conquering the dragon and stuff, that's kind of like the way that we want to be the macho man in our real life. Freud's biggest flaw was, though, that he connected everything to sexuality and thought that all of the myths that we told were essentially about us explaining human reproduction, which, again, people have a big problem with today. So going back to the team, Carl Jung is another influential thinker on this specific squadron, and he described dreams as a way similarly for people to explain their own lives and their own journeys, but he thought about it a lot more about how people circumnavigate their personalities without it having to do all about sexuality. Instead, he looked at the heroes and stories and thought, my goodness, that is us. And by telling these stories, we're essentially looking at the darker parts of ourselves. We're trying to understand the human experience this way. Carl Jung, extremely influential thinker. All right, we got our teams. You know which ones are favoring what. I want to know what you guys think for this one. We got one essential question to answer here on the bottom. It's in 2 parts, so it says final questions. Which of the teams do you think is the strongest? Like, which of the teams you find yourself saying, yeah, I think mythology might actually be because of what this team was saying? Or which of the teams do you think did not have such a grounding? You thought they were talking about a lot of nonsense. This answer is up to you. I just am asking that you guys support your answers with some notes. And as always, try to connect it with examples. I will see you all in class.